First off, I really just want to thank everybody for joining. We've got a really great and exciting session today. We're going to go into a deep dive into how voice automation is powering some really great customer experience, all while reducing the cost in the call center and creating a foundation of data which can be used to continuously improve not only the technology, but also the business processes and intelligence as well. But before we jump into the agenda, I'd just like to make everybody aware that if they complete a survey as part of this webinar, we'll be donating to charity on your behalf. And so it's for a really great cause. As everybody knows, 2020 has been a really difficult year. It's been challenging in terms of change, anxiety, and uncertainty. And the impact on everybody's mental health has been quite significant. So to try and address this, the charity Mind have launched a Christmas appeal to expand the services they offer to everybody who needs it during the pandemic. And so we'll be donating £5 for everyone who completes this simple survey, and you'll find this in the chat section of the webinar. And so just by ways of introduction, my name is Brad Stein. I'm the Sales and Business Consulting Director here at PolyAI. And for the webinar today, we've got about 25 minutes of content, which will include an introduction to what conversational AI actually is, why customers traditionally have been so frustrated with voice automation technology. And this really ties into some of the direct key challenges to deploying conversational AI and getting it right. And so to discuss some of these challenges, we've got on the line, Ryan, who's joining us from BT. And over the last few years, Ryan has worked with many voice automation companies, including PolyAI. So he knows firsthand about some of the challenges that need to be overcome to get something like this working. So Ryan, do you just want to do a very, very quick introduction?
Yeah, thanks, Brad. So my name is Ryan McGurk. I am one of 3 service innovation delivery specialists within BT Enterprise. And we focus on bringing in new capabilities to service within Enterprise and then doing a POC and seeing if we work to scale them up.
Great, thanks, Ryan. And then so to discuss how both PolyAI and BT were able to overcome some of these challenges, we've also got Emmanuel, who is our product manager at Poly and responsible for the work we've carried out recently with BT. Emmanuel, do you just want to do a quick intro as well?
Yes, hi everyone, I'm Emmanuel Sevrin. I'm an engineer by training, but for the last couple of years, I've been working on conversational AI tools in the telecom industry.
And so once we go through all the content, we've got 15 minutes toward the end, which is going to be reserved for questions. We've got a really great panel here today with a lot of experience and knowledge. So I'd encourage everybody to make this as interactive as possible. So as we go through this, if you do have any questions, pop them in the comments or in the chat, and we'll make sure we address everything toward the end of the session. So to kick things off, I think it's really good to understand conversational AI and the benefits by taking a look at the evolution of automation tools within the contact center. And it all started with IVR. It's a very familiar experience for pretty much anybody who has ever interacted with pretty much any major company, such as a bank, utility company, credit card, travel company, you name it, pretty much anybody with a very, very large customer base. But whatever the vertical, IVRs share a common theme, which is that they are very, very frustrating for customers. And this is down to the fact that they are usually overloaded with useless information, which takes up a lot of your customers' valuable times. They're overly complex for what they are, which means callers often get routed to incorrect destinations, which we call a misroute. And they don't enable customers to express what they are trying to achieve, meaning that they're not really fit for deep or complex automation. And so the next evolutionary step was to add voice. And this was a really logical attempt to reduce the complexities of IVR, but this caused more frustration than they removed. And the reason for that is that voice is not always detected accurately, which means you often hear things like, sorry, let's try that again, or hey, can you repeat that one more time, which is a really, really frustrating experience for the customer. And so as a result, businesses began to simplify their speech inputs, resulting in horrible directed dialogue experiences. So, you know, that typical thing, hey, for questions about your bill, please say billing. And this really defeated the purpose of voice because of this style of dialogue actually creates more problems than it fixes. And so with this in mind, a lot of businesses started to turn to chatbots, and there's been a lot of hype around this technology, and they do actually work for very, very simple interactions. But what more and more businesses are finding out is that people still call, and you can try hiding your phone number, you can try increasing your wait times, but these tactics at the end of the day are really just going to instill more frustration among your customers. So what customer behavior and analyst predictions are showing is that businesses will still need to maintain a voice channel, and that and at PolyAI, we've really been able to make some key breakthroughs which enable us to automate complex interactions. And we call this technology AI-powered voice self-service or virtual agents. And so a lot of the challenges that we get when talking about this technology is customers who think that IVRs aren't all that bad. And your IVR may be working fine today. And to give some businesses credit, they have streamlined their IVRs. But even businesses with IVRs who have good experiences today are not maximizing the full potential of voice automation. And in the very near future, they're going to be compared against businesses who have deployed conversational AI and virtual agent technology. So I think in short, IVRs are not really fit to deliver amazing customer experiences. And the reason for that is that the way that people speak is completely unpredictable. The traditional linear design of an IVR makes it impossible to build a conversation that actually lets a customer lead the experience and get their query resolved quickly. I think additionally, when IVRs are enabled for voice, speech recognition can also fail for a variety of reasons. So in the UK, I think there's over 69 different accents. You also have the complexity of poor audio connections from mobile phones or landlines, as well as the different ways that people phrase what they actually want. And this is where voice automation becomes really, really tough, because traditionally IVRs often rely on keyword spotting, which means that your customers are being forced to speak like robots. And it's just not natural. And callers typically have a lot more complex intents. Every single call that we've listened to in a call center so far, the opening intent to an agent is very much a story of that customer's journey, where they've come to, why they're calling in. And that's a lot of valuable information that can be extracted, which just isn't possible with IVRs. And so because of these challenges, IVR builders and developers focus on caller containment rather than caller engagement, because it's impossible for them to predict what a caller might say or the path that they might take. And this is usually why as customers, we hear too much information from IVRs, constant repeats, or irrelevant prompts during a typical IVR journey, which just frustrates me and most of your customers out there. So I think with all this in mind, what we're here to do today is really explain how conversational AI can be successfully deployed and proactively improve the customer experience. This is not just a cost-cutting measure. And in this particular example, to really prove the power of conversational AI, we chose the toughest call type to automate that BT had to offer, which was broadband troubleshooting for their enterprise clients. So I'm going to hand it over to Ryan, who's just going to explain the use case in a little bit more detail and some of the challenges that we had to overcome. Ryan, over to you. Classic, you're on mute.
I am on mute. Thank you very much. Thanks, Brad. So like many large service contact centers, we have pain points. Pain points for our customers and then pain points for the business. So I'm going to quickly run through three of the main pain points for us, showing our initial interest and now investment into a voice assistant. So time is the first one. Time for our customers and time for the business. So it works both ways. So time for the customers is simply customers spending time in the queues or having to call up more than once to get an issue resolved. And both are not a great experience for the customer, and it's something we want to reduce as much as we can. Time for the business is, with most service contact center, mostly a cost, and I'll come on to that a little bit more near the end. But more calls means more advisors required and a bigger pressure on them to keep their handle times low. The more we can remove that simple, repeatable queries, for example, how much is my bill, or I want to pay my bill, then the more time we can spend, the advisors can spend solving more complex queries and providing the customer with a personalized experience that they deserve and expect. Consistency as well as more of an inconsistency, and that's dependent on advisors' experience, on which sites they're based on, who their coach and manager is, and who's their supporting them, can provide different answers to the customers who have the same types of questions. Obviously, a virtual assistant follows their approved troubleshooting. We'll set the process for that, and it can remember a repeat caller. So if someone's calling for the same issue different times, it's going to give them the same exact answer, or hold the answer they give them and then give them the follow-up answer if there's a slightly different query to the same question. So that reduces the customer effort massively. And then customer feedback from the websites has identified that our customers are not easily finding the self-help guides on our own online portal. And there's a massive piece of work to simplify and improve our online portal, but that takes a bit of time, and customers have already decided they'll call in and start using it again. It takes a bit of time to get customers back into there. So even using the search tools, they'll still find problems. So this experience quickly leads to customers calling in, and there's about 80% of our customers choose to call in through voice than use the digital channels. And then we also found that customers using the speech-enabled IVR, they get misrouted quite often because they're saying what they think their problem is, and that might misroute them to the wrong type of advisor. So where they're saying that the broadband's not working, they might have an outstanding bill. So they're going to route to repair where they should be speaking to billing. So that starts their journey with a frustration because they're having to get transferred to department, and then they think that the advisors don't know what they're doing when they actually, that's not true. They're really skilled and they're highly trained, so they know exactly what they're doing, but they just can't deal with their query. And then the third point is the cost. So the first 2 points massively contribute to that cost, but the big one for our cost is the labour. So with any service centre, we've got to have people answering the calls or answering the chats, and that's a big cost. So the more calls that come through, and the more people that we need, means a higher cost. So add in our time of day profile. So we operate as a 24 hours a day, 7 days a week business, and that comes with advisors getting allowances and shift pattern allowances. Then it all contributes to a much higher cost of operations. And for the use case, so what we did, as Brad alluded to, is we used a repair use case. Now, for a POC within our current structure, we don't have the ability to use APIs and to set it up quickly. So we did a sort of light touch, and it made it super complex for Brad and the guys, but it was really good to see how they worked. So it was a repair scenario where a customer called in, they says they had no broadband fault, or they had a broadband fault. So we find that majority of customers that have got a broadband issue is down to their own domain checks, so it's their own equipment on site. And so we took them through the checks to see if we could contain that call, and if not, then it takes some of the time off the advisors going through the checks with the customers, which could take 10, 20 minutes depending on the customer's knowledge.
Great, thanks for that, Ryan. And so now we'll talk a little bit about what it actually takes to deploy one of these things. Once we've mapped out the challenges, like Ryan was mentioning, how do we overcome them?
Right. So there are 3 layers to the challenge that we have faced. The first one is to be able to diagnose the problem with precision. However, the customer described the problem, being able to understand what exactly is the challenge they face. The second one is, once we've diagnosed the problem, being able to guide the user through a self-serving process to be able to solve the problem. And the third one is make sure that overall we deliver an experience that fits and supports the brand image that we want to convey. So on the first one, for any digital agents anywhere, Brad, can you get to the next slide? For any digital agent anywhere, there is a challenge about correctly understanding the user, but it's even more challenging in the case of troubleshooting because it's full of small differences. There is a subtle difference between a user whose broadband drops every 24 hours and a user who had no broadband for the last 24 hours. There is a difference between a user who has a slow internet speed and a user that had no internet speed. And we want to be able to diagnose that with precision to be able to then guide them through the correct troubleshooting steps. Compounding this difficulty is the fact that some users have deep and extensive technical knowledge. They've been working in IT for 20 years and they are able to precisely describe their problem and also the router types and the steps they've already performed. And others just know they have no Wi-Fi. They don't even know what a router is. They're just calling because they're not getting any internet and they want the problem solved. And overall, like for all of those users, it's critical that we adequately capture what exactly is the problem they're facing, because there is nothing more frustrating than calling because you have a problem and you feel like you're being taken through a steps of automatic checks that doesn't fit at all the exact problems that you've had or the steps that you've already performed to be able to solve the issue. You want to feel like you're being recognized and understood and guided through a process that really fits what exact problem you have and what exact solutions you've already tried to implement. So to be able to solve this first challenge of adequately understanding the user and understanding the problem they face and diagnosing it, we've been able to rely on our proprietary encoder model, which had billions of pre-trained conversations. And that meant that for every single type of issue, we only could start with 30 example sentences, 30 or so, and already be able to extrapolate from those 30 example of framings a large volume of example phrasings that users can say to describe their problems. And then on top of that, within the first 2 weeks of deployments, our agents self-learn and automatically improve until we have a very high level of accuracy after 2 weeks of deployments. And all of that together meant that, after 2 weeks of deployments, we were able to reach a very high level of accuracy in diagnosing the exact problem that people are facing. The second step in the challenge is to be able to, once we've diagnosed the problem, to guide the user through a self-service journey that they can perform as much as possible on their own. Because it makes no sense to transfer the user to an advisor if they haven't tried already to restart the router, if they haven't tried to plug into a different router, to a different socket, sorry, or if we can perform a speed test automatically. On the other hand, restarting the router, for example, is one of the most cliche questions that you can ask someone. And if you're not careful, it can really come across wrong. Like, there is nothing more frustrating again than calling because you have an issue, you've already tried restarting the router, and you've explained your issue in depth, and you feel like you're just talking to this passive voice telling you, have you tried restarting the router? And obviously it's exemplified by this example, but across the whole user journey, it's very important to design with empathy and make the user feel supported in the process, as opposed to make the user feel like I'm just taking you through an arbitrary checklist. So what it took to be able to address this challenge was combining the human-centered design and the conversational design expertise that we have at PolyAI with the broadband troubleshooting experience of a BT. And we've done that through various workshops and working together to be able to define a user journey that always asks the question with the right tone at the right time in the right way, so that people really feel, again, supported and helped through the process, as opposed to just left on their own trying to figure out the issue. The last challenge in this process, sorry, Brad, can you go back? It's still linked to the previous point.
Right.
It's being able to react and understand and react accordingly to any sort of users' responses. So when we ask users to perform a check, or when we ask users to describe the router or to try another socket, their responses will range in a variety of ways. It could be asking for more time, it could be asking for clarification, it could be expressing confusion, it could be saying they're not on site. And again, we want to be able to understand and respond accordingly to any sort of reaction from the user. So here again, we were greatly helped by our proprietary encoder model, which is able to really understand a large set of intents and a large set of responses from users. And then it was very simple to react accordingly. So if the user asks for more time, we just give them time and tell them to come back to us when they're ready. If the user says they're not on site, we respond accordingly. If the user asks for more information, we just provide them the guidance they need to be able to find the solution. Finally, on top of the initial design that we did together, the first set of weeks were also critical to together identifying how people interact with the digital agent and optimize for it, so that we were optimizing for customer satisfaction and a sense of support that customers were experiencing. Great. For the last point, I'll let Ryan talk about that briefly.
Make sure I'm off mute this time. So for BT Enterprise, it's a premium service. So customers come to BT Business because they expect the best service possible. We therefore didn't want to just remove any personal element away from a customer and go back or go with a basic bot. We wanted something that would wow the customer but maintain that brand image. And we always strive to look for the best-in-class vendors and someone who can provide our customers with the service that they expect. And we know when customers contact us, they do in the least path of resistance for them. And so as I mentioned earlier, 80% of customers choose to call in over the digital channels. So we want capabilities that's going to enable that effortless experience for the customer. We also want to do we also want to do that by using not only a voice assistant, but we want to connect it to our existing capabilities, our diagnostic tools, and our CRM and systems, and then have the ability for the new stuff that we're going to be delivering on POCs in the future of the next 12 months, 2 years, 5 years, all the future technologies that we're looking at is making sure that has the capability to easily, simply slot in as well. So yeah, that's the 3 main points for that one.
Great, thanks for that, Ryan. So I think what we can do now is really introduce the BT virtual voice virtual assistant. And so, Emmanuel, do you just want to cover some of the features just before we jump into a vision clip?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the main points are listed on the slides here. What we now have is a virtual agent that's able to diagnose the problem, collect the critical information from the customer, the router type, their lights types, and depending on the situation, requiring the user to perform a number of checks on their own. So trying another socket, trying the test socket if possible, trying another power outlet, So to be able to then get the user to perform a number of checks as much as possible on their own, and then if none of those checks have worked, we transfer the call to a human advisor, giving to the human advisor an overview of what is the problem, what are the tests that have been already performed, and what are the next steps. So that was done for the POC without any integration. So all of that could be done quite fast without the need for any sort of further integration. And for the next steps, we plan to integrate further with the BT infrastructure to be able to do things such as performing a speed test check, or if none of the problems solve the issue, scheduling an appointment with a specialist.
Great, thanks for that. And just before I play the clip, I mean, I think one of the things that really impressed me about this deployment was the sheer speed in which it happened. I mean, I think we went from discovery to first call within 3 months, less than 3 months, for one of the most complex call types. So I'll just go ahead and play a clip now to give you an idea about what the experience has been like so far.
Hi, have you contacted us about this issue in the past week? No, I haven't. Understood. Can you tell me a bit more about your issue? Just having trouble connecting to the internet. Okay, I'll have to perform a few checks with you. What have you tried so far? I've tried turning it on and off again, but it doesn't work. Great. Do you know your router type? No, I don't. Is there a BT logo on the router? Yep, I can see one. Is there a grey strip across the middle of the hub with the BT logo on it? No. Is there a silver plastic band at the bottom? Yep, there's a plastic band I can see. Okay, that's a Home Hub 5. What colour are the lights on the router? It's flashing red. Thank you for all your help. I've got all the information I need, and I'll pass it over to someone who can help. Please hold the line.
Great, so that whole music at the very end there represents a transfer to a live agent. I think some of the key points about that, identifying the router was actually a very, very tedious process for BT. And quite often what would happen is that people were dialing in against routers that were not actually BT routers as well. So it's very important to identify the router type, identify that light sequence, to be able to educate that advisor when they receive the call, what the next step would be, how they're going to proceed, what the next best action is. And so I think going into the next slide, Emmanuel, do you want to take this one?
Actually, I think it's Ryan.
This is Ryan. This is my one, yeah. So before we start, what I'll do is I'll give you a quick brief update of what we do for any POCs that we deliver. So before we start any introduction of a new capability, we first do our research on the technology, what it is, and then a deep dive on the possible vendors that we've got in the market just now. So we pick the market leading vendors and we talk to each one and make a decision on who we're going to go with for a POC, and we decide, or we find out who the market leading vendors are for companies like Forrester and Boston Consulting Group. So we use these sites to look at what is the one that's best in market today, or where do they sit on the emerging quadrants. For a virtual assistant, our roadmap was to do actually a chat virtual assistant first and then a voice one. So we trialed a chat one at the start of the year with a different vendor. After seeing how they and their technology worked, we decided they were not best fit strategically for us moving forward. And that led us on to PolyAI, who was suggested to us by one of our technical researchers who says that they were one of the big up-and-coming ones. So we were quite excited to contact them and reach out and see what they were able to offer. Initially, I found that quite a breath of fresh air. I was super impressed of how quickly they quoted they could set up a POC in comparison to other vendors, especially when we were talking about voice. And then even more impressed, like Brad says, it took 3 months from me initially having that conversation to them actually doing the first call for us for the POC, which was really impressive. Building the use case, so it was quite a complex process for me to decide what use case we were going to do. So enterprise services is vast, and there's lots of use cases that we could have done, but I didn't want to just take the quick, the simple, easy one. I wanted one that would test the capability and put the guys under a bit of pressure and test it in their capabilities as well. But from my perspective, once we decided what the use case was, it was super simple for me to do. I provided the guys with a process, access to some of the subject matter experts, and they were away. And I was sure Emmanuel didn't find it as simple because obviously he had the complexities to actually deal with that and then turn it into something useful. But anything that we build, it's got to be future proof. So it goes a long way of showing that any changes we make in the process of virtual assistant can also be updated really quickly to coincide with the changes we make. Not only did the guys build it really quickly, but they made changes really quickly during the proof of concept. So we did an 8-week proof of concept, and Emmanuel was making changes from the end of week 1 nearly to make improvements as they learned from the customer's conversation, which I was really impressed with. Other vendors that we've worked with, not just for a voice assistant or a virtual assistant, but with any proof of concepts, tend to put the product in and then just leave it for the 8 weeks. So it's quite good to see them run in sprints in an agile way through a proof of concept as well. And as I touched on from before, our customers want a personalized experience. So having the ability to plug this into our CRMs and pull live data was a must. And so that's going to be the next stage of us to trial. But I'm really looking forward to seeing that. And overall, actually, I found the guys very good to work with. They were very forthcoming, they communicated very well, and they were always throwing new ideas my way to tie things differently from what my preconceived motions were for a virtual assistant. So it's been a great experience for me and a good learning experience as well.
No, thanks for that, Ryan. I mean, I think just to echo that, we've had a great time working with yourself and the BT team in general. And I think that's one of the real key things about how do I go about building this for my company is very, very close collaboration on both sides of the project team, coming up with ideas together, overcoming challenges to really get these things working and providing a great experience for the end customer at the end of the day.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, great. So that brings us to the end of the content section of the webinar. Next is really going into Q&A, but just before we jump into Q&A, I just kind of wanted to bring up the charity again. So again, if you fill out a survey for the charity, we'll be donating £5 for each survey. So we've already got 9 people who have responded. If you click on the link within the chat, you'll be able to see it. You can also scan the QR code down there on the left. And just to kind of give you a little bit more info about Mind, they work to provide advice and support to empower anyone experiencing mental health problems. They campaign to improve services, raise awareness, and promote understanding. And what they found is that at least 1 in 6 workers experience common mental health problems, including anxiety and depression. And their research shows that the biggest cause of this is stress in people's lives, and more so debt or financial problems. So it's a very tough time. So what would be really great is by the end of this webinar, we could get that counter up to 100 and really make a difference here. There we go. I just got one more. Thanks for that. So we'll jump right into the questions. So as we've been going along, we've got quite a few questions. So we'll just go through them and we'll figure out among us who will answer them. So to start, what do we need to get started building a voice assistant? Emmanuel, do you just want to talk us through that?
Yeah, so the answer is really not much. You need to have expertise in the industry and know what are the exact issues. Ideally, to have a few transcripts of conversation with human assistants and a sense of the use cases that you need to address. And then most of the rest is taken care of by us.
Great, thanks. And I think another big part of this as well is the technical element. So what's really great to have is documentation around how the telephony is actually going to integrate with the contact center system and how the calls are going to get to the virtual assistant, as well as how calls are going to get back to live agent advisors, as well as transferring the context of the call to those live agent advisors. So there's no essence of repeats, which are very, very frustrating points for customers. At PolyAI, we've got a lot of experience deploying these. We've done this over the last couple of years, and we've got a very tried and tested way and process about how we deploy them. And I think it speaks to the speed in which we've deployed BT in just under 3 months. So the next question is, can these voice assistants speak different languages? How easy is it to put in a new language? So one of the reasons why PolyAI was founded, and we called ourselves PolyAI, is the ability to handle interactions across any channel and any language. So typically we support every single major European language, as well as a list of languages outside Europe. And additionally, really that takes about a 2-week lead time to add additional work for that. But what's really nice about the technology is that the same logic, the same call flows can be redeployed quite simply across the additional channels or across the languages. It's just really a little bit of ASR work that goes into standing these things up. And so the next question is, what sort of training data do you need to get started? So Emmanuel, I think you've got a lot of experience in this, especially dealing with BT, as some of the questions that we would get from the callers are not typically built into the encoder itself.
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, the strength of our technology is that it's already pre-trained on billions of conversations. And therefore, we only need a very small subset of existing conversations training data to be able to build a digital assistant. And when I'm saying a small subset, I'm saying in the order of 30 per intent. On top of that, once we deploy, within 2 weeks, our model auto-learn and self-improve, and we reach a very high accuracy within those 2 weeks. And then we're able to understand most of the user queries. So the answer to the question on the training data is a very, very small amount.
Great, thanks for that. And so the next question is, what % of customers' questions get resolved by the voice assistant without escalation to the agent? So I think for the BT use case, I'll let Ryan talk about that in just a moment, but it very much depends from customer to customer and the use case. So we have deployments currently live where we're getting upwards of 80% containment and improvements in customer service for those for the application that we've built. And that was primarily around restaurant bookings and as well as some logistics applications. But because of the complexity of troubleshooting and the design and the goals of the BT application, what we were really focusing on was AHT, or average handle time reduction, with a kind of secondary focus on containment. So I'll just let Ryan speak about some of those, what we've been able to achieve so far.
Yeah, so for the POC, we achieved 50% containment, and it's mainly down to, like I said, it's a use case that was not light touch, so it's part of a call, and so it's not the whole call, and we didn't have any integration there, so we weren't able to authenticate any customers, so we couldn't do a full journey, we couldn't do any diagnostics on the call, as in tests from our OpenReach systems. So the containment was quite low, but I'm going to make an assumption here, which once we've got APIs and an integration, I'm expecting that to jump up quite high, especially on this type of use case.
Great, thanks, Ryan. And so I just figured I'd put the thermometer up here again. So we've got a couple more people who have responded to the survey. I encourage you to keep going. We're not too far off 100.
Yeah, so I mean, if there are not so many questions, I also wanted to complete on the containment rate. I mean, indeed, it depends a lot on the level of integration. What we know is, depending on the use case, but also mostly depending on the level of integration, we can reach a different level of containment. And in the most optimal cases, when we have access to very good level of APIs, we can reach above 90% of containment.
Great, thanks, Emmanuel. And one of my favorite questions is next. We get this asked all the time during new meetings with customers, is why would I just build this myself? Why can't I do this with Amazon Connect, Google Dialogflow, or what we would call a DIY bot building platform? And the reason for that is that these tools are really not sufficient to build a complex, nonlinear conversational design. People have been trying to do this. Yes, you can get some very, very quick, simple wins. But when it comes down to complex automation, it's very, very difficult. And we've actually benchmarked our encoder model against some of the data, against Amazon, against IBM, against Dialogflow, against Raza. And what we found with very, very little data, we've been able to achieve on a per turn success anywhere up from 90 to 94% success, when Amazon Connect and Lex are sitting around a 73% success. And so these tools are primarily used as an IVR. And even the way that they're built when you're designing these things, if you ever have had experience, is that they're not structured to be able to build a nonlinear design, essentially. And they take a lot of data to get up and running. So I hope that answers that question. Okay. And a question from Anonymous: was it just the one use case in 3 months? And yes, it was. And that encompassed discovery, it encompassed the integration, as well as a very, very detailed deep dive in terms of how far the troubleshooting went with the particular use case. But the no broadband use case actually branched out into several different paths, in a sense that we had to build a lot of complexity into that flow to be able to maintain a high level of containment as well as handle time reduction. Okay, and next question. So how do you give the bot new answers or update the IVR options? Emmanuel, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So the process of editing the policy or adding new intents is again very straightforward. So when we see the users asking a new type of question we hadn't foreseen, or we need to add a specific type of FAQ, or for example, we need to refine a use case. We're like, okay, in the case of no power in the router, we want to ask them this question. It's very easy for us to either change the prompt or add a new response or ask the user to perform a check. Like the iteration process is very, very fast.
Great, thanks. And one from Ryan, what did you like most about the experience so far? What were the highlights for you?
That was super simple. That's probably the easiest way to explain it. So the previous POC I did with the chat one was very labor intensive from my perspective. It was a lot of monotonous, repetitive tasks for me to get where we wanted to get the POC live. Whereas for this one, for you guys, I just built a flow on an online tool, and you guys took it and ran with it. So that's been the highlight of me, is just you guys did all the work, and I got to sit back and enjoy the fruits of that.
So another benefit of not building it with Amazon or doing it yourself.
Yeah, you don't have to do a lot of stuff. That's it.
Great. And so the next question is, what kind of speech recognition do you use? Emmanuel, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, so we combined models from multiple vendors. And so we have multiple vendors that we use ourselves, and we have our own algorithm to combine them and use the best one depending on the use case.
Great. And so we've just got time for one more, so I'll pick one. It's how fast can we get a business case? So business cases are extremely easy for us to develop. There's about 6 or 7 questions that we can ask, and we have a business analyst here at PolyAI. So it's one of the first things that we did for BT, because any type of solution that you're going to automate, if you're going to take calls away from the agents, then it needs to actually deliver cost savings as well as customer service. So customer service is always the first thing that you should consider. And then underpinning that should be the business case to make sure that it makes sense. So I think that's all the time that we have today. It's been fantastic presenting all of this to you, and it's been really fantastic working with the team here. I myself, as a solutions architect and as a salesperson, have just had a fantastic time working with Emmanuel and from Ryan. I think we've done a really, really great project, and watch this space. I think you're definitely going to see some great things to come this year and 2021. So thank you very much for everybody joining, and have a great evening.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Goodbye.